I have frequently had this observation made to me in the most pompous manner by some little minister. "Oh, sir, I feel the danger of your position, and I always make it a matter of prayer to God that you may be kept humble." I am exceedingly obliged to the gentleman, but I am sure I could make it a matter of prayer for him that he might be made humble once in his life by way of a change, for he had never yet known what humility was as far as he was personally concerned. Now you know very well that it is just as easy for a man to be proud in his rags as my Lord Mayor in his gold change. There is many a costermonger riding in his little cart quite as vain as my lord who rides in a gilded coach. Indeed, I dare say he, the last one, feels very little pride, but very great shame at having to make himself so ridiculous. You may be a king and yet be humble. You may be a beggar and yet be proud. You may be great and yet little in your own esteem. You may be little, and yet you may be greater in your estimation than those who are the greatest. See to it, then, that your low estate does not make you proud any more than your high estate. Again, success often has a very sorry influence upon humility. The man was humble before his God till God had given him the great victory over the Moabites. But then his heart was lifted up within him, and the Lord forsook him. When he was little in Israel, he bowed before the Most High. When he became great, he exalted himself. Great success is like a full cup. It is hard to hold it with a steady hand. It is swimming in deep waters. There is always a fear of being drowned there. It is standing on the top of the pinnacle of the temple, and Satan often says, "Cast thyself down." But on the other hand, want of success has just the same tendency. Have you not seen the man who could not get a congregation, and who insisted upon it that it was because he was a better preacher than the man who did? I read sometimes a magazine, the doctrine of which is this: if you want to be a good preacher, you must preach according to the skeletons which are given you in this magazine. There are some who do this, but still find their chapels empty. Then, says the magazine, with all complacency, the men that get the congregations are always the weakest men. They are always the men who have the least mental power, while we, who have but a few, a mere handful, we are the intellectual people. The mob always will, they say, run after the foolish men. So that the brother who gets no success comforts himself with this thought, that Providence is quite wrong, and that the Christian public are quite mistaken, that he ought to be, if things had been right, the most popular man living, and that it is quite a mistake he is not. Now, want of success has a very great influence on some men to make them feel, well, if I cannot succeed in getting other people to think me somebody, I will think everybody else nobody, and I will elevate myself above them all in my own opinion. Now, I am speaking some home truths. I have received a great deal of advice myself, and I think I may sometimes take the liberty of giving it to others. I hope that those who are always thinking of success as certainly involving pride may also take to themselves the considerable reflection that their non-success, suggesting as it may very bitter thoughts about their brethren, may also be pride only in another direction. But then again, long enjoyment of the Master's presence has a tendency to make us proud. To walk all day in the sunlight brings us in danger of a sunstroke. Better not sit too near the fire, or one may get scorched. If we have nothing but full assurance, we may come to be presumptuous. There is nothing like the heat of summer to breed putrefaction. When you have long-continued joys, fear and tremble for all the goodness of God. But on the other hand, long-continued doubts will breed pride. When a man has long been doubting his God and mistrusting his promise, what is that but pride? He wants to be somebody and something. He is not willing to believe his God in the dark. Thinks, in fact, that God deals hardly with him in allowing him to be in despondency at all. He thinks he always ought to have joy and satisfaction, and so it comes to pass that his doubts and fears are as ready parents of pride as assurance could have been. In fact, to cut short a very long story, for I might go on with these two sides of the question all morning, there is not a position in the world where a man cannot be humble if he have grace. There is not a station under heaven where a man will not be proud if left to himself. I pray you, never think that leaving one station and getting into another will be any help to your humility. 'Tis true, the peasant boy in the valley of humiliation sang, "He that is down need fear no fall, he that is low no pride. He that is humble ever shall have God to be his guide." But I dare say that very same boy was sometimes singing in that very valley songs of despondency, psalms of pride and wicked rebellion against his God. It is not the place, it is the heart. It is not the position, but the grace. That man is as safe on a pinnacle as on level ground, if God hold him up. And he is as much in danger in the valley as he is upon the high place, if God be not with him. If the Lord forsake him, he will fall in either place. If the Lord be with him, he will stand in every position. I have thus hinted at some of the dangers to which humility is exposed. And now, thirdly, some of the arguments by which we ought to be provoked to humility of spirit. First, let us draw some arguments from ourselves. What am I that I should be proud? I am a man, that is to say, a worm, a thing that is and is not. An angel, how much he surpasseth me! And yet the Lord charged his angels with folly, and the heavens were not pure in his sight. How much less then should the Son of Man, a creature full of sin, lift himself up and exalt himself as though he were something? Verily, man at his best estate is altogether vanity, his life a dream, an empty show. O vain man, why shouldst thou be proud? Think of our mortality. In a few more years we shall be worm's meat. Caesar's dust shall be eaten by the basest of creatures. Take up the skull of some departed one in your hand, and say, "What had this man to be proud of?" Go to some charnel house and mark the corruption. Look on some body which has been buried but a little while, what a heap of loathsomeness. And yet you and I carry about with us the elements of all that putridity, the food of all that rottenness. How then dare we be proud? I have at home a picture which is so admirably managed that when you look closely at it, you see two little boys in the bloom of youth at play, enjoying each other's company. If you go some distance from the picture, the outlines get more and more indistinct, and standing some few yards away from it, it turns into a death's head, with vacant, empty eyes, and the bones of the skull and the jaws, a perfect death's head. Now, this is just ourselves. When we are looking with our poor short sight of time, we look like fair beings that are full of life. But stand at a scriptural distance and view these things, and you soon perceive that we are nothing after all but death's heads. What right then have we to be proud? Begin not to be proud, man, till thy life is secure, and thou knowest that will never be. Thou bubble, boast not of the many colors thou hast, thou shalt burst directly. Thou glorious rainbow, exalt not thyself because of thy varied hues. When the sun withdraweth his lights, or the cloud removeth, thou art gone. O thou fleecy cloud, that art so soon to burst on the earth and be dissipated forever, think not of thyself and thy fleecy glories, for thou shalt soon depart and be gone. Every time your humility gives way, and your pride lifts up its head, think that you are mortal, and the skeleton may teach you humility. But there is a yet stronger argument than this. What are you but depraved creatures? When the child of God is at his best, he is no better than a sinner at his worst, except so far as God has made him to differ. There goes John Bradford, but for the grace of God. Nay, there goes Paul to curse, if not for the grace of God. There goes Peter to be a Judas, unless Christ shall pray for him that his faith fail not. A sinner saved by grace and yet proud? Out on such impudence! God pardon us and deliver us from that evil. But then, let us think we are not only depraved so that we are inclined to sin, but we have sinned. And how can we then be proud? Sinners whose highest deservings are the wrath of God and the hot flames of hell, how can we venture for a single moment to stand as those who had done anything meritorious or could claim anything of our own God? Verily, you and I may stand up today and say, "What is man that thou art mindful of him, or the Son of Man that thou visitest him?" The more we think of ourselves, if guided by God's Spirit, the more reasons we shall find for serving God with all humility.